Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation called Epidemiology Studies, an Introduction to Epidemiology. My name is Rebecca Fine. My friends call me Dr. Rebecca because I recently finished all of the work for my doctorate of health science in global health, which I'm very excited to receive. Okay, that was a little distracting. It started to play at the same time. So sorry about that. Anyway, I just wanted to take a moment to introduce all of you to one of my favorite subjects, that being epidemiology. Most of my work experience has been in epidemiology, working with infectious disease data. And I know that it's very difficult for many of you. So I offer consulting, tutoring, writing, lots of different things to students and researchers based on my own experience working in public health in the state of California and in the state of Georgia, as well as my clinical research training and background from UC Davis. So I take all of that experience and I bring it into the classroom or the consulting room. And I do also use my life coach certification with many of my clients who are looking for confidence when it comes to epidemiology. Epidemiology and several of the science classes that people take in this field can be very difficult for maintaining your confidence and for growing. You'll notice behind me, I have a couple of pictures. This one is Louis Pasteur in his lab, and Louis came up with germ theory. And also, you know, if you've had pasteurized milk or had your dog vaccinated for rabies, or you yourself were vaccinated for rabies, you have in fact benefited from his work. The other picture, this one, oh man, I'm so bad at this. Anyway, the other picture, that one, this one. Okay, how do I move my head so you can see it? Anyway, the other picture is Joseph Lister. Yeah, that way, that one. Joseph Lister performing surgery. Joseph Lister is considered to be the father of modern surgery, and he went ahead and he built on Pasteur's theories of germs, and he realized if he washed his hands between patients, his patients lived longer. So this is something that is still very valuable because the #1 way to prevent the spread of disease is to wash your hands. So that's what we know about those types of things. And let's see, I don't know, are these all comments on my YouTube channel coming in? All right, so moving on to the rest of this presentation, because I don't want to just sit here and talk at the world about these various things. I do want to go ahead and begin this presentation. So I've put together a little presentation about various aspects of epidemiology, which I would really like to run through and give you guys some information. If you have questions, I do have a Google form that I will be adding to the description of this video very shortly. And all right, here we go. An introduction to epidemiology studies. Now, I don't want you guys to think this is another boring video and everything is gonna be terrible. This is not designed to be terrible. This is just designed to be a very, very brief, high-level overview of what is epidemiology. So the first thing that we should always look at in the health disciplines is the etymology of the word. Entomology, meaning the study of origins. So epidemiology comes from the Greek. It has 3 different parts from the Greek. Epi, which means upon, demi, which is population, and ology, which is the study of. So when you see, like, for example, biology is the study of life. Epidemiology in this context for this presentation is a branch of medicine dealing with incidence, distribution, and control of disease in populations. And I want to make a special point here that you can look at other conditions, other events, and it doesn't have to be an infectious disease. Epidemiology is more than what you're seeing right now with this little guy, my little friendly COVID-19 doll. You know, it's more than just the coronavirus. Epidemiology has way more to offer the world. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we sort of go through some of these key points that I want to talk about. So when we look at an epidemiology study, we're trying to answer the 5 W's. Now, sometimes we're trying to answer one of these, but it's best if we answer all of them. So the case would be the person or who. What is the disease or the condition? Location is self-explanatory. When is the time frame or the time period? And why is, of course, the cause, the transmissions, or the risks. Answering these questions not only help to determine what the landscape of the disease is, but they can also help with creating therapies and other things. An example of this is back to my COVID doll here. Several of the vaccine people are working on finding a way to block the little spiky structure here. The spiky protein is on the RNA sequence, which helps get into a cell, just like it would be doing with my hand here. Then once it's in the cell, it can replicate. If the theory is if you can block this, you won't have the replication. I've been reading various things about how this is mutating. So it is normal, by the way, for viruses to mutate. People do ask about this all the time. It's very normal. Common terms. All right, this is just a sampling of some of the vocabulary because I didn't want to overwhelm anyone. Incidence is the measure of new cases. Prevalence is the measure of existing cases. These two terms get mixed up quite often, and so I really wanted to make a point of putting them here. Another thing that gets very confusing for people is correlation, which means that a relationship does exist, versus causation. Correlation does not equal causation. Generally speaking, causality is about cause and effect, right? You know, I sneezed, therefore I had a bunch of mucus leave my body type of thing. Or I went to sleep and I woke up and therefore, you know, I had my coffee because I woke up. I'm not gonna have coffee in my sleep. But causality is different than correlation. Please keep that in mind. Endemic. Endemic means something is constantly present. Epidemic is, again, it's a pond, right? It's going upwards. Pandemic is an epidemic in many places. And of course we have Corona, and we also have our little friend, the Spanish flu, for pandemics. Here's a little overview about different types of studies. So the ones that I want to look at today are these 4: cross-sectional, cohort, ecological, and case control. I want to look at these because these are the most common ones you will see. There are other types of epidemiology studies, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to go through those. Cross-sectional studies are usually the ones that I've seen when I'm working with students. But there's a huge place for them in research as well. And that's because they look at one point in time. So you could take like all the corona cases from last week, for example. It's an observational study. It is to assess prevalence. It does not assess incidence, only prevalence, because you're looking at a period of time. Again, doesn't determine causation. The data collected is often routine data, and it doesn't answer a specific question. It's really just kind of collecting routine data to look at. Cohort studies, this is when you follow a group of people from exposure to outcome. You follow them for a set period of time, usually. Often these are long-term studies, longitudinal studies. They can be retrospective or prospective. That's mostly referring to the data that they're using. Loss to follow-up can result in biased results. So I've put a period there because I want you guys to pay special attention to that. And they can demonstrate causality. So I want to go back to the follow-up. Loss to follow-up can lead to biased results. So when loss to follow-up leads to biased results, what you end up with is a situation where somebody has fallen off of your study for whatever reason. This could be you lost their address, you lost their phone number, you don't have their email address, they withdrew from the study, they stopped coming in for visits, any number of reasons. And that can lead to biasing in your results because if you have a study, say with 300 people, and let's say you have 75 women in that study and all the women are lost to follow-up, then you can't really address women very effectively. Your results are going to be biased. So please keep that in mind when looking at cohort studies. Ecological studies. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about because statistics describe groups, not people, right? And so ecological studies compare groups, not individuals. And you can do different types of comparisons between the groups. There's a couple of things you want to look out for in your research, and I think that people should look out for this in general, but it does fall under the ecological studies. So the ecological fallacy is that you assume that group data applies to individuals, and the example here that's usually given is test scores. So for example, I give a math test to two classes, and class A scores really high and class B scores really low. And I go to the mall and I see somebody from class B and I assume that they scored really low. And I see somebody from class A and I assume that they scored really high. And the reality could be that I just saw the highest score in class B and the lowest score in class A. The group doesn't necessarily reflect the individual. There's some other great examples, but again, I'm trying to keep this from becoming a difficult thing for you guys to follow. Then there's the exceptional fallacy, and this is the opposite of the ecological fallacy, and this is where you assume that one individual reflects on a group. And the classic example here is, you're driving down the road, a woman makes a driving error, therefore you assume all women make driving errors. That could just be that individual is an exceptional case. You can't necessarily project that out from one person. So please keep that in mind when looking at these types of studies. And really in all of your research, I feel very passionate. I don't like bad research or bad information. So please do not feel like you're stuck. Case control studies. I looked at these a lot more when I did my master's of health informatics. Haven't done too much of this with the doctorate because I was specifically looking at secondary data for my doctorate. But case control studies compare individuals with a disease, who are the cases, to a control group, who are the individuals without the disease. This is something to keep in mind. That these are also observational studies. They're retrospective because you already know what the outcome is as the investigator. So as opposed to the cohort study, which would be retrospective or prospective based on data, looking back or looking forward respectively, case control studies are considered to be retrospective because you know the outcome. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation. Again, I'm going to put a form that you can fill out in the description of the video as soon as I stop the live stream, so that you guys can have a wonderful time reaching out to me for all of your questions. I would love to help with whatever is plaguing you. Usually when I say that, I hold up my plague doll, but I just reorganized my desk. I do want to make sure that you guys are very, very well situated for your epidemiology careers, your epidemiology research. I love this and I want you to love it too. So thank you again, and hopefully we will chat soon.